to the Raise Your Energy podcast. My name is Linda Lange and I'm your host. One of the lovely souls in my community asked me the other week if it is a crime to trust and love people too much. Asked in another way, should we be more careful trusting people because at some point that trust might just be broken? So let's talk about it today. Stay tuned. So let me start this week's episode by explaining that trusting is actually our natural state of being. Having trust is what is actually normal. Not trusting is an altered state of being, and it is not our natural way of existing in this world. And if we are in an altered state, it means that we are out of balance and we are not in harmony with ourselves, with life, and with nature. So our systems are out of whack, so to say, and we are actually in survival mode. That's what happens when we are distrusting. So therefore, being trusting of people and trusting in our future and trusting the universe means that you're in harmony, you're in balance, and that your body is in a very natural and healthy state. Every person has, of course, their own way of trusting. But if you want to look at the two ends of the spectrum, you find either people that just trust straight away from the beginning until maybe a person does something and the trust might go away, or they will lesser trust them. But generally, these people just trust everybody 100% when they meet them new in their life. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have people that do not trust new people that come into their life. They say things like, you have to show me that I can trust you, or you have to prove to me that I can trust you. So they always say, I'm not trusting anybody. And maybe over time, if they show me that I can trust them, then I trust them. So we have these two ends of the spectrum. Either you trust completely or you don't trust at all, and trust has to be built up. And then, of course, there are all shades of gray in the middle of that. Guess on which end of the spectrum I am and which side I advocate you to be on as well. Yes, you guessed correctly. I'm, of course, on the side of the spectrum that trusts everybody. I trust people right from the start. I trust everybody in my life. And I want you to do the same. I want you to trust everyone who steps into your life. I want you to trust any situation, any experience that you have in your life, and that you trust that you will be fine. And I want you to trust the universe or whatever you are believing in, that you are going to be good and that the universe has your back. And why would you want to go through your life in a state of being that is distrusting, that is suspicious, and that puts up walls between you and other people? And I know that people who are generally more distrusting, or they have issues trusting people, they think that they have a good reason. And I get it. I completely understand. Still, I'm asking you to move from this state of being to a new state of being. I ask you to move from your current state of being distrusting of people to the other state of being where you trust again people. The reason why people are quite often distrusting or don't want to trust people right at the beginning is either that they have learned it when they grew up. They might have had parents or other adults in their life who told them not to trust anybody. And they just learned it, that they just thought that that was maybe a normal way of living life and that you just can't trust anybody. And the other reason, of course, can be that their trust was just broken one too many times in their life. And I completely understand if that happened to you, but still, I ask you to move away from it and see if you can move towards trust again in your life. If your default state is that you are generally distrusting people, what do you think the universe is going to send you more of? Correct. People that you cannot trust. It's the simple law of attraction. Remember, you are the creator in your life. And that means you can decide at any moment in your life to move from one state of being to another. You can move from having distrusted and having problems to trust people for the last years or even decades or your whole life. You can decide to move to the other side of that spectrum and trust people again and let go of the old stories in your life and build new stories. And you can move from being in disharmony to harmony in your life and being in imbalance to balance. The normal state of being is trusting, to trust people, to trust that you're going to be all right, and to trust the universe, your higher self, God, or anything else you believe in. Trust them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect at this, for sure not. I'm still working on myself, especially when it comes to the universe and that I'm going to be all right. I have always been trustful in people. I've never moved away from that state of being. And yes, my trust has been broken by people, but I don't allow other people to break my state of being. I don't let other people in my life influence my state of being and my state of balance and harmony. I don't give my power away to other people to control what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? So I have had people break my trust, and I have taken my consequences to move maybe to lesser trust, to be a bit more careful, or to just not have them really around anymore in my life, of course. But that doesn't mean that when another person comes into my life that I portray that to that person, that scenario that happened to me in my past, I don't project that onto that new person. That is not fair, not to that person and actually not to me and how I want to feel in my life, right? So I trust every person right from the start. Where I'm still working on is trusting completely the universe, trusting that I'm going to be all right every moment in my life, and trusting all the experience and all of the situations in my life that they're there for a reason and that I'm going to be all right. Of course, I'm all right now, and that means everything I experienced in the past happened for a reason. So let me ask you this. Can you think about an experience that you had before in your life, and back then it was either quite difficult or quite traumatic, but actually looking back at it now, you are quite grateful that it happened. You are actually quite glad that it happened, because otherwise you wouldn't be your current version. You wouldn't have evolved, or you wouldn't have had other new experiences in your life that actually came as a result out of that traumatic event. Can you think of something else? My personal go-to example that I generally use when I talk about this is that I was made redundant of my first proper job when I was just 21 years old. And looking back at it now, I'm so glad that that happened. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone on to my next adventure and the next and the next. My life would not have been so adventurous and so amazing and so exciting if I would have stayed for years on end in that other job. So now I am grateful that I was made redundant. But at the time, that was, of course, kind of a shock moment, right? It was a little bit traumatic to hear that you're losing your job. So I bet you can think of an example, a similar situation in your life where you have experienced this. So, if something in your life has happened recently, or maybe a bit of a while ago, that has broken your trust, can you reason with me that there is a future self of you that is already seeing why this had to happen and being so glad that it happened, because otherwise they would not have received the following experiences that were so much better? Do you see that? Can you see that if you can think about a previous traumatic experience and see now the lessons in it and why it had to happen today, that you can actually do that again in the future about something that just happened to you now? Does that make sense to you? And because you know that you have done this in the past, you just came up with an example in your life where this has already happened, it means you can actually do it again. It means that if something happened to you very recently in your life, somebody or something has broken your trust, that means there is a future self of you that is already glad that you moved on from that person or that situation, and you are now there so much more happy and so grateful of what else you received, something much better that happened to you afterwards. So if you now understand, if it made click in your mind that you can do this and that this is going to happen again, even in the situation that is still so hurtful maybe, or traumatic or raw inside of you, that you can actually move quicker to your future self now if you want to. It doesn't mean that you have to, but maybe knowing that you will end up at that future self one day helps you to take already some of that pain away and move closer again to trusting people. I don't want you to think that this is just super easy and it happens overnight. It can happen overnight and it can be super easy. It doesn't have to. But if you want to, you can move quicker to trusting people again out of the current situation if you want to. You make that decision. You are a supernatural being. If you're up for the challenge that I'm giving you here and you are currently struggling with trusting people, then keep reminding yourself of that future self. How is this person thinking about the current or recent situation? What are their thoughts about it? How is this person living their life now, that future self? How happy is that person? What are their feelings, their gratitude? What does that gratitude feel like? Put yourself into their shoes now, and it will help you to overcome the situation that broke your trust recently or a while ago. So step closer to your future self today and move back into that normal state of trusting wholeheartedly. That is how you're supposed to live and love in your life. Thank you so much for listening, and feel free to ask me as well questions that you would like me to answer in one of my podcast episodes. You can send me a DM on Instagram. You can put a question into the comments if you watch me on YouTube, or you can put it into the review section of any of the podcast platforms where you're currently listening to me. I would love to answer more questions like this from my community. So thank you so much again. And with that, I love you and leave you. Talk soon and bye-bye.